Good evening, everyone, and welcome to IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice in your everyday life. My name is Andy. I work as operations manager here at the IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway, and we are very pleased to have you with us both here in the live studio audience and online with YouTube Live. So, IKYA Live is a news program unlike any other where we take the news of the day and break it down and look at the spiritual principles at play. Sometimes we take a direct news headline like the conflict in Israel and Gaza, for example, and look at those spiritual principles, and IKYA helps us to see how they play together and how we might play a more productive part. Other times, like tonight, we take rather a spiritual principle that we see playing out across a lot of news headlines. And we start there and help us to understand better how this particular spiritual principle is playing out in the world around us, and then how we might better study and support and sort of be a light in the world rather than contributing to the confusion and chaos. So tonight, what we're looking at is a principle where it's kind of obvious if you're awake in 2024 that the human world we've created is chaotic, it's noisy, it's full of distractions, and truly almost every aspect of modern human life has been designed to block the awakening and flowering of consciousness. So, if that's the case, the question is, for those of us who are spiritual seekers like you and like us, well, then how do we deal with that, and how might we better navigate and support others around us in fact awakening consciousness? Now, before we get started, this IKYA Live, it comes alive by you bringing your questions and your perspectives to bear. So please write those in the chat below, and I will relay them to IKYA. We'll also get questions from the studio audience. And before we get started, be sure to share tonight's episode right now with fellow spiritual seekers, because the more people we have with us live, the more dynamic conversation we can have and the bigger impact we can have. So go ahead and do that. And we're going to get started by asking IKYA, first of all, how is it that we've gotten to this point of such a chaotic, noisy, and distracting world?
To understand that, we need to zoom out. Not just to look at the planet, but also the timeline. Because we are in a very strange place of human evolution, and hopefully it will pass. The thing is, we have created a civilization culture that caters to the individual. And the individual has no off button. When it comes to basic survival, we are supposed to fill our own needs. And then we're supposed to take care of everyone around us. When we only fill our own needs, and we continue to do that, we get disconnected from anything else, and we get addicted to dopamine. We get addicted to our habits with no other purpose. So, from nature, satisfying your needs is about making you strong, making you survive, right? So you have something to offer. Our culture, satisfying the individual has become the goal. And it means we become self-absorbed, and we do not engage in step 2, which is taking part in everyone, taking care of everyone around us, building families and all that. So we can see we are dissolving the families. It's all about the personal goals, personal wants, personal needs. And we've become consumers in every possible aspect. And this is what, of course, corporations, how they make money. Because the more we focus on our individual needs, the worse we feel, because we feel disconnectedness. And then we need to self-medicate. One knows that what causes depression more than anything is a sense of disconnectedness. So when people are disconnected and suicidal, and depressed. It's a state where they basically lack connectedness and the experience of belonging, which human survival is all about, right? You cannot, as a life form, procreate without being with other people. So it's not just individual survival, but the group survival. And then you're supposed to have kids, you're supposed to build society and civilization, all of that. So when we're in a state of disconnect, we're supposed to feel that there's something terribly wrong here. So keeping us in that state is smart for business because it means that we will buy more stuff. We will self-medicate. We will focus on ourselves, our own dopamine. So telling everyone that you do what's best for you, you should follow your dreams, you should do what's right for you, will actually lead people into depression and misery. And then they will self-medicate and buy more stuff. Keeping people single and disconnected and lonely and miserable will make people consume more. And it's good for business. It also means that you will get more illnesses. Everything is worse. And you can see when you look at our civilization since the dawn of the industrialized phase, gradually we became more focused on the individual because now the individual could follow kind of their dreams and have what they wanted, right? And that becomes the obsession. And at this point, all humans in our part of the world are completely addicted to their dopamine and also addicted to the idea of the individual being more important than anything else. The individual is never important in itself. It's only through connectedness that we exist. Right? So we all know this. When we feel togetherness with one person or several people, we just like stay in that energy. It's more important than anything else. We have everything we need. So business is trying to dissolve that. Sell us stories of what happiness is. And happiness is whenever you get whatever you want. So we have become consumers. And what the big machine of corporations are doing is also making us work more for less. Now, if we can sell the dream of what our life should be, but make sure that people cannot have it, because then they will relax and they will be happy and they will be productive and then they will consume less. It's selling the dream that you should be over there. This is something you can have. But the path to that point becomes slippery and impossible. So you work harder, you pay more tax, you buy more stuff, everything is more expensive and you have to pay it because now you're part of the machinery. You will feel miserable, you will feel lack of purpose, and then you will consume more and you will need more medical treatment and you will spend all your money not living the life you want. This is where the corporations want you to be. And this is where we are at. So, and remember, this is something we have created together. We removed a sense of purpose. The moment we decided collectively that I want stuff, I want to satisfy my needs, we become worse people. We all know that how we become good people is by being challenged, is by dealing with other people, dealing with conflict, understanding that we're not that important, we're not that special, we're not that unique, and having to give up on many of our own viewpoints and what we want to make it work, right? When we look at families a few generations ago, there would be, 4 to 10 kids. And I mean, like growing up would be rough, but you would develop social intelligence. You would understand more about your place in life. You would learn negotiation. You will learn self-regulation. Today, that's gone, right? So we're all extremely self-centered. And we believe that we deserve it because we're so special. And we tell each other that we're so special and we deserve everything. And of course we don't. So we create all of these fantastical expectations. based on the individual dream. And it's impossible for most of us. And then we'll become miserable, and then we'll self-medicate, and we just become part of this whole thing. Look at how we have organized work life. It is making us all miserable. Nobody wants this big machine where we work ourselves to death, so we can just get enough money to pay our bills so we can go to work. We don't want that. Nobody wants it. Our food makes us sick. And the food industry, they're completely aware of it because it's good for business. The pharmaceutical industry is also making us sick. Often they're also the ones producing the chemicals being used in the food industry to make us sick. So it's this whole thing. It's simply about business. For the big corporations and for the ruling classes, nothing more, than a cow they can milk. Everything today is rigged to lower our consciousness. Look at entertainment. It's so dystopian. It's so negative. Everything is about how terrible it is to be human, how trashy we are, how terrible human beings we are. Ha ha ha, this is fun, All of it is like that. Now, we are affected by it because it shows us what reality is. We cannot help but being affected by it. We have functions in our brain where we basically mirror and become what we see. I've earlier explained that experiments with flies, for instance, have shown that flies that are exposed to death, they die earlier. When they see other dead flies, they die earlier, not from illness, but by the impact of seeing it. For humans, it's the same thing. When we see and experience things that are destructive, those experiences will influence us. And it will pull us down. It will influence our brain, our thought process, our emotions. Now it's all over. And we're exposed to very unhealthy values or lack of values. Like everybody's trashy, right? We're all destructive. Nobody's got a productive family anymore. We're just showing that we're all fuck-ups all the time. And that becomes the ideal. And we're pulling ourselves in that direction. So entertainment today is mostly extremely destructive. And all these arenas of life comes from us having become addicted to the idea of the individual and individual happiness. And because the individual happiness can only come through connectedness, we cannot become happy by seeking individual happiness. Although that's the story, that's what we're being sold, but it's never worked for anyone. So, and one thing that I find really interesting is that the driving force of our civilization, where we have the big technological breakthroughs, like which is basically pulling our society, is humans trying to find more efficient way to kill each other. The military-industrial complex, that's where all real innovation is happening. And when we look at it from the outside, and then we wonder, why aren't aliens, interacting with us more? This is the reason. The driving force for human civilization is figuring out how to kill other humans. Think about it. Think about how destructive it is. It's not love. It's not lifting. It's not healing. It's not balance. It's finding better ways to kill each other. That mindset permeates through everything we do. The food industry if they can get away with it. The pharmaceutical industry, they don't care. Killing other human beings is business. And it's a driving force. So everything we do as humans today, roughly, it's all pulling us down. It's all blocking us. It's all destructive. And it's lowering the consciousness. I often say that it was easier to teach humans how to reach higher consciousness a few centuries ago than it is now. Because you had to, humans were less caught up in all the fluff because there really wasn't any. It was the fight for survival, and it was that. But now humans find themselves in this weave of destructive behaviors, thoughts, impressions, products, collectiveness. And it's very difficult to get out of. And as a spiritual seeker, you know this. It's so much more difficult today to get rid of habits because you're marketed, to when it's trying to use your habits, when it's trying to use whatever negative emotion you have. And look at social media. It's a cesspool of destructive thoughts and emotions and evil. Because this is the state of the human collective mind. Humans are not trying to make life better. They're just trying to make life worse for everybody else because they feel bad. And it means that your patterns are the same. Just look at how easy it is to have negative reactions. How many times a day do you have a negative reaction? Right? If you go back a few hundred years, humans actually had fewer negative reactions, even though they may have had more reasons to, because they accepted this is what life is. It's hard and we die. Because it was just how life was. So they had fewer negative reactions. They just accepted that life is hard. But today we react to everything. And as I've said many times before, when we are in a state of reaction, it lowers the consciousness to kind of the lowest point in your mind, because at that point, you're nothing but a biological response mechanism. You're basically a biological machine. There is no consciousness at all. And because of the complexity of life, you are reacting so many times, interacting negatively so many times, and sometimes you are in a state of negative reaction, which becomes chronic stress. Most people today have systemic stress. It never leaves them. That blocks the consciousness. You cannot be in that systemic stress and also expand your consciousness. So the go-to when we begin to unpack our human behavior and human patterns is looking at reactions and understanding that when we react, we become what we react to, because we mirror that energy, which is really stupid when you think about it. When there's something you don't like, by reacting to it, you become an extension of that energy, so you become what you don't like, which means that you're locked, glued to that thing you're reacting to. Spiritually, the purpose of it is that, it shows something in you. It shows something in you that you need to work on. So by having a reaction, it's a recognition that this is an externalization of your own karma. And then when you recognize it, you will be glued to it until you figure it out. The spiritual way, however, is to learn to never react. You always begin with a higher consciousness. But for most people, that is impossible today, because we are in this pool of information, impression, and behaviors, and consumerism and depression and illness and like all of this stuff. And it's all pulling us down. We are not able to collectively change it. This has kind of gone too far in the human culture. We'll just have to play out. The only way is to wake up as an individual. And when we do, we understand that we just have to let other people be. Because they're just doing their thing. If that is their active level of consciousness, then that is where they're at. Judging it, criticizing it, trying to change it is a waste of time. Because then you are in reaction. If you want to lift, you have to bring something else in. Right? And that is the difficult part of it. But first, why did we kind of choose this collectively? What is the spiritual purpose of it? The thing is, this is a kind of bottleneck for the human life form and for this global civilization. For humans and this civilization to be lifted to a new level, there are a lot of things that we need to work out. We need to grow past this primitive level. Primitive behaviors, where humans are destroying everything, killing each other, destroying the planet, just being self-absorbed with no purpose. And we can't go on like this. So the bottleneck is for humans to grow past it, which means that what humans are doing to themselves and to others will be mirrored more powerfully. And that will be part of the collective experience, which means that in the beginning, one will simply become more reactive, more aggressive. But at some point, one will also start looking at solutions. So that's the bottleneck, and it means that the potential, when humans move past this, is that everything will explode in a good way. Humans will be able to reach potentials that humans can simply not even imagine today. By the end of next century, there will be a greater jump in evolution from where we're now to the end of next century than it was from the Stone Ages to where we're now. It will explode if humans are able to get past this bottleneck. But remember also, this mirrors you. It mirrors your spiritual potential. It means that you chose this planet and this life form and this time because you find yourself in a bottleneck. It means that you've reached a point in your own spiritual evolution where all your patterns, all your behaviors, all your karma, all of that also represents a great potential, a great transformation that you may go through. Just like the journey of this planet civilization, you find yourself in the same spot. This is what this planet is mirroring to you, which means that the potential of spiritual growth and spiritual evolution is greater than you have ever experienced. And this means that your karma will be amplified, will be mirrored from more angles at the same time. Because this is what's happening on this planet, right? For everyone. When we are not waking up, we will be consumed by our own karmic mirrors because we can't deal with them. That's fine. It means that we will become even more horizontal. Now, and the reason for that is when we are not ready in our consciousness, we will move into a sleeping state. Because if we activate too much in ourselves, it will be harmful. So if we think that when we are being mirrored in all sorts of ways, from what's going on this planet, if it's too much, we will live in a state of self-medication. We will just try to escape. We will just make up excuses. We'll just be part of the horizontal, and we will fall asleep spiritually. That is protecting us from taking part in the big expansion. That can only happen if you wake up. So it kind of self-regulates. And this is also why when people fall asleep, and we can see that they're lowering their own consciousness, it is because spiritually they recognize, I'm not ready for this jump. I'm not ready for this great expansion. So to protect myself, I'll go into hibernation. And that is also the great challenge that you are facing. Do you want to wake up, or do you want to fall asleep? Because there are only those two options. Most people on this planet are falling asleep. They're becoming biological machines with absolutely no sense of spiritual awareness. And it can easily happen to everyone. The key is to understand that whenever you react, you lower your consciousness. Whenever you judge, you lower your consciousness. Whenever you criticize, you lower your consciousness. That state and that energy will turn you into a robot of patterns. And this is how it happens. So, where we start is training ourselves past reaction. Always looking at what is happening and then ask the bigger questions. Why is this happening? What is life trying to show me? What is life trying to show me that I could do differently? What is the greater plan here? Why is this manifestation or this situation necessary for everyone? Right? We need to ask more existential questions when things happen, because that is how we are able to go past our own patterns. This is where you start. You find yourself in a bottleneck in your own spiritual evolution, and it's up to you to do something about it. So we'll begin to unpack more of that, but first we had a question.
Yes. When we were preparing for today, I remember that what really struck me is this whole setup that you're describing tonight. We're putting it on like hyperdrive as we introduce artificial intelligence into the world with basically no safeguards, no stoplights. Like there, and artificial intelligence is going to be able to. You just mentioned we become robots. It's like the more we introduce robots and artificial intelligence to do the various tasks that we used to do to be able to survive, to be able to meet challenges and grow in that way. I mean, so many of these basic things in life could disappear as something that I or you or do in our daily lives. I mean, in a couple of years' time, it's kind of crazy. And how then, if we then put that layer on, to your point, that we need to train ourselves past reaction. What if we have enough robots that like we don't even have any reactions anymore? So talk about that layer with AI, please.
Yes. Now, we've talked about this before, but one thing that is really funny when it comes to AI is that we develop AI to do all the creative work so that we can spend more time doing the dishes and cleaning the house, instead of developing AI to take care of that so that we may become creative. But it's because human consciousness at this point is so low that we want AI to invent, to innovate, to be creative, so that we can just walk around in our reactions and to be mechanical and then have all our needs met. So yes, the interesting thing is that AI will then become more creative and will live more, interesting lives and more juicy lives, while humans will just sit there and be served. So who's the robot? And this to me is so funny. But we have reached the point where the collective consciousness is so low that in many ways one can say that AI is the last invention that humans will ever make. Because after that, AI will take care of that so humans can just walk around and exist and lower their consciousness even more. So again, who's the robot? These will be interesting conversations that I think humans will have over the next decade. But it is quite interesting. And when we turn it around, right, when humans are creative, they can then use AI to be even more creative, to express themselves, to kind of let it become an extension of their own brain, right? And then we can create even more. But let's face it, most people will do the opposite. They will turn themselves into the robots so that AI may be creative. So, and this is also, again, the difference between waking up and falling asleep. Because through AI and robots, people can fall asleep even faster, or they can wake up even faster. And this is the wonderful thing about where this planet is right now. This is the bottleneck. When you actively do what it takes to wake up, everything will accelerate. You will grow faster, you will heal faster, your consciousness will grow and you learn faster than ever. But if you let yourself fall asleep, that will happen faster too. And you will see it. And many of you will be desperate because you can see people just becoming more and more addicted and attached to their patterns, becoming more and more entitled and passive, and become more robot-like. They exist. Obviously, they have lives, but there's nobody home. And they'll scream and yell and complain and react, but that's all that's going on. And then you have people doing the opposite, using whatever is going on in the world to explore, right, to do new things. Because we need to understand that humans have never had more opportunities than right now. When you wake up, you will figure out that you can explore anything in you. You can develop any talent in yourself. You can manifest anything, you can do anything, you can be anywhere on this planet, right? To make use of what life is offering you, but most people are not. So we all need to look at ourselves and our kind of comfort patterns. And the more we complain, the more it is a sign that we have no plans of making any changes. When we criticize and complain, it is basically the brain saying, I'm not going to do anything about it, so it's someone else's responsibility. I will just sit here and be entitled. People who are creative and juicy, they don't complain. When they see something they don't like, they do something about it. Or they move, or they, they're not passive. They use their creativity. They're always optimistic because they know whatever is can change. When we're passive and in reaction, we'll always think it's someone else's responsibility. We want things to change, but we see it as someone else's responsibility, not our own. And we will see this kind of divide widen. And in your process, you need to make sure that you are kind of using this opportunity, this lifetime, to wake up spiritually. And not just pretend that you are. Because it's fully possible today to pretend to wake up spiritually, but to fall asleep completely. And I talk about this a lot, but modern spirituality, for the most part, is that. It's childishness. It's just being pretentious. It's not doing practices that work. It's just going into the feeling and identity of being spiritual. And then nothing. So it's the same trap. It's the same passive trap. Waking up means that we become extremely active, extremely creative, and we utilize everything in our lives to transform continuously. So this is kind of where we need to aim.
So we have a new student on YouTube tonight who talks about that a lot of tech, we've talked about it earlier as well, that some tech has come from alien cultures, and that currently perhaps a lot of tech is actually hidden, and that the artificial intelligence that we're sort of aware of in the collective consciousness is really just child's play compared to what's really out there and being developed sort of behind the scenes. Is there anything to that that we should also be aware of going forward?
When it comes to artificial intelligence, that is not really part of more of the hidden technologies, strangely enough. Remember that most of the technology being hidden from plain sight are part of the military-industrial complex, which means weapons, and the weaponization of technology. Finding better ways to kill other humans. Not necessarily to do it, but to be in control. And the reason why technology is hidden is not to hide it from people, but to hide it from the enemy, which will be other countries. That's the driving force. So when it comes to AI, this is kind of a new thing for humans. So, and also AI is developing so fast that 20 years from now, it will be beyond what people can imagine. 100 years from now, so it's just getting started. So no, the hidden technologies are mostly about discoveries in physics and weaponization. Unfortunately. But AI will definitely also be the biggest change in the military and weaponization, all of that. Again, we're just at the very start of something, and as Andy mentioned, we have no safety rails. And the reason is that humans do not fear something that we do not have a genetic memory of. So, humans are afraid of heights, but not of speed, because speed was not a thing throughout evolution. Heights were. So, we only fear instinctively what is part of our genetic makeup. And a lot of these things is not. So we have no reason to feel fear. It has to be recognized. So we will only fear AI the moment AI does something that we can recognize genetically. And then it's too late. So we think, oh yeah, I could destroy everything, ha ha ha, and then we just continue. So we're not going to stop until something terrible happens, and then it's too late. But that's human nature. So we have absolutely no pause button on this. And humans always think that they can control everything. Just like you remember when young people are driving a car, I'm in control because I'm so cool, then they crash and die, right? But they think they're in control. And it's always the people who take it too far who believe that they are in control, because otherwise, why would they take it too far? And it's the same thing when it comes to AI and all technological advances. People who believe that they're in control are so not. And they think that, well, we can control it, so we can just turn this into, a self-thinking weapon, because I'm smarter than AI, and no, you're not. So humans will have to go through a lot of experimentation and self-damage before they get on track. And so this next 150 to 200 years will be rough. We're just in the very beginning. This is the age of endarkenment, which is basically that bottleneck that we need to move through before things get better. And it's only if humanity survives. But back to your own process, right? It mirrors your own karma. If you experience that life is blocking you, it's because you were blocking life. You chose to incarnate here because it's a rendering of where you are. So this is also why it's so important to look at the world around us and not just disconnect because we're spiritual. This is your kind of chamber of mirrors and resonance. It's mirroring you. And by engaging in the world, taking part in it, studying it, you're letting yourself be mirrored. You're letting your own karma be triggered. But when you let yourself be triggered spiritually and you don't go into reaction, meaning that you are in denial and trying to push it away, you activate. Right? Because you are the one blocking life in you. You are now the bottleneck in your own existence. This is why you incarnate here, now. So you have all these different lines of karma, all these different things that you need to see in yourself for you to work out and heal and to transcend. That does not happen by you being in denial, pretending that you're someone you're not. Karma can only be worked out by engaging in the mirrors, engaging in the manifestations, learning, transforming, changing our ways, and then figuring out how do I think, feel, and behave on a higher level. This is how we do it, right? But understand that you find yourself in your own evolution just on the verge of an enormous potential, but you have to work out a lot of complex karma, and it doesn't happen by itself. And most people are not willing, and they're in a way wasting the opportunity by falling asleep. Waking up spiritually is a lot harder than humans think. You have your habits, you have your beliefs, you have all your patterns and reactions, and you have your biology. And when you then exist in a culture that tries everything it can to nurture your lowest parts, your most primitive instincts, it's difficult. So we need to look at the practice of how to move past this.
Yes, we have a question in the audience.
Thank you, IKYA. Some parts you answered already of my question, because I was thinking, how the fuck should a soul want to incarnate on Earth when everything is so fucked up? And is it predetermined if the soul, when it incarnates here, will be falling asleep even more or waking up? That's the first part. And the second part, I've seen that you have a presentation or an open house on Wednesday on mantras. How could those mantras support us in the process of waking up?
Right. First thing, now, just like when we as people, we will be drawn to something based on a potential, right? That we say, oh, I want to do that, or I want to test that out, or I could totally do it, whatever. We don't know until we do it. So it's not like everything is predetermined, because then everything would just happen and we would know everything. We don't know, which is exciting. So we may have an idea of, okay, I'm going to work on this karma. And I want to incarnate there because there will be merit and I can totally nail it. And then we enter, and then all of a sudden, because when we're hit with potentials, it means we haven't been in that point of our own evolution before. We have the experience, but we do not have experience with something we haven't experienced. So it will always be, different shades, different colors, different variations that we could not imagine. And then life will hit us, in new ways. And then we have to figure it out. So sometimes we enter a lifetime and we're absolutely clear. We have a very strong ambition and we know exactly what we're doing. Sometimes that happens, but more often we're not entirely sure. There are some things we know I can do that. And there are other things that I've not been in that situation before, so I don't know. But I'm excited to try. Spiritually, we're always excited just to try and see what happens. And the joy is to not know. And failing, is part of it. And failing is also interesting because it's when we do something and it doesn't work out, it is as interesting as making it work. Right? Because it's still interacting with truth and then uncovering what is working, what's not working, and why. And that journey never stops. Right? But we all have the intention of growing. But yes, on this planet right now, of course, a lot of souls incarnating, they've had the ambition to really kind of grow, because you choose this planet now because of this bottleneck, because it's exciting. But just like the lottery, right? The stakes are high, and a lot of people or souls, they want to take part of this movement. And sometimes, just by being here, you're being mirrored and activated. You can't just sit here today without reacting, right? Which is the lowest form of stimulation. So you will be experiencing things even through your devices. You can sit there and you will still get information. So you will be triggered. And then you're supposed to do something about it. But yes, a lot of souls have had the ambition. I want to grow faster. I want to wake up. And then their karmic complex being showed to them, right? It's activated. They react. They lower their consciousness and they're gone. This happens a lot. But it also means that, this is as much as you could deal with. Right? It means also, again, that then you are protected from what's going on. Because there's no point in harming yourself if you interact with too much of your karma and you're not ready. It will just harm you. So then you will fall asleep, meaning that you will not be really interacting with anything, right? So, and that's smart. This is how life works. But yes, there are also a lot of individuals incarnating with an insane level of spiritual ambition and seeing the potential and truly wanting to wake up and kind of learning how to set themselves free from more of that primitive karma and move into those potentials. And those are the people we're trying to reach, right? Because there are a lot of them too. But then you need to learn how to do it. Because thinking about it, saying that you want to wake up is not waking up. And a lot of the old stuff will simply not help you. Because many of the old practices were based on your life being easier, right? You had to find food, you had to find, a wife or a husband or something. Like, it was very simple. It could be tough, but simple. Now it's easy, but extremely complex and complicated to the level of people just like not knowing what to do. It's too much. So then we are in this endless state of stress and destruction. So yes, spiritual practices represent the only way one can wake up. It doesn't happen by itself. In the old days, which is why it was easier a few hundred years ago, well, if people just sit down, and just relax enough, and then look around, look at the trees and mountains, they will end up in meditation, right? It doesn't happen anymore. It can happen, in a moment, but for most people, that never happens. So they don't connect. And again, our whole culture is selling the idea of disconnectedness, right? The journey of the individual being important when we know that it will make everyone unhappy, right? So, yeah, it is tough. So learning practices that can actually help you. There's no other way. And what we also need to learn, which is so difficult, is like, how do they work? And how do you know if it's working? Right? Because it's not about the feeling. Because we are so gullible. We're tricking ourselves all the time. And remember that your body and your brain at this point is addicted to dopamine. It's addicted to its patterns and habits and what it wants. And then the brain thinks that spiritual practice is the same. I should feel good, right? It should make me feel the way I want to feel. It should give me confirmation about how important I am. It should soothe my ego, right? So when I feel that I'm not important enough, it should make me feel important, and that's connectedness. It's all of that, right? I'm not blaming you at all. I'm saying it's the natural result of where we are in our culture and civilization. So it's difficult. And this is why, yes, I think that working with mantras is not only a starting point, it's necessary. It is the sharpest knife in the drawer if you learn how to do it properly and if you learn the right mantras. I'll get back to that. Yes?
We have a question in the audience.
Yeah, I have so many questions. Okay, so before I've heard you speak about kind of where the world is heading. For example, you said Africa could be the, let's say, energetic leader showing.
Sure.
I'm just wondering a little bit about, do you see if there is a hope for the world coming together as one species? And how do you connect that with, for example, what is happening in America now with election, but also kind of the BRICS movement?
Right, but remember that evolution takes time, right? So these changes will happen over time, but everything will accelerate more. And what will make the biggest change is that there are different souls incarnating into the human life form, right? Think of if you have a sports car being driven by an 8-year-old grandma who are really afraid of everything, or a professional driver, it's the same car. Still very different. And this is basically what will happen to humans. One is now slowly phasing out the ones who are falling asleep. The ones who belong to the consciousness of destruction. That will have to play itself out. So this is the big change of the next 150 to 200 years, is that we'll gradually have more and more souls operating on a kind of different level of evolution, incarnating into humans. One can see that with a lot of young people today, a lot of kids, they know exactly why they're here. They operate on a higher level. It's a completely natural shift, and it's also necessary. It happens in all life forms when you get to this point. Normally, when a life form gets to this point of evolution, they will self-destruct because they have enough technology to kill themselves, but not enough consciousness to not do it. And humans are the same. So normally what happens for a life form to survive is that the more kind of primitive souls will move on to other life forms and more advanced souls will take over. So this is gradually happening, and it means that one will then skip several kind of generations. And many of the kids incarnating now, they already know. They already exist in a state that is the solution. Not all of them, but this is a gradual thing, because if it's too abrupt, that will make the whole thing collapse. So first you need to introduce them, and it will be fucking annoying for everyone. And gradually, just like, it will be like, the youth of today times 10, right? And this is what we're seeing, and it's necessary, but this will keep going, and gradually over the next 200 years, there will not be the same type of souls incarnating in the human life form anymore. So same car, new driver. So again, as a hope is for idiots, because it's wishful thinking. It's learning about how both evolution works, looking at the greater plan of this planet, and have fun with it, right? If this planet were to self-destruct, yeah, just in this universe, there are trillions upon trillions upon trillions of planets with life. So this is insignificant, right? There are so many places and life forms that it's not important in itself. And there are infinite dimensions with even more life. So you will have so many variations that are almost exactly the same as this one. So no problem. We have the right to experiment, or the right to explore. And again, with all experiments, sometimes they explode. That's fine. So this is also the experiment with this bottleneck. As in, most life forms will self-destruct. The plan here is because there are so many different alien cultures invested in the experiment of developing this planet and this life form, that one is doing what one can to help this life form kind of past this bump in the road, because it's fun, right? It's co-creation. So understand that when different planets are being developed, it's mostly through other life forms, seeding and working with it, because it's how life works. So this planet is under heavy administration. There are so many different life forms coming here. They've always been coming here. So humans, as I said, it's a combination of alien DNA and an ape. And it's means also that when you have more advanced consciousness incarnating into humans, more of the genetic potential will then be released, because again, they know how to drive the car. So this is already happening. One can see that when humans incarnate with a higher level of consciousness, they are human in a different way. It doesn't mean that other humans do not have the same capabilities, but they don't have the consciousness, right? They're not a race driver. So they're driving the car as if they're going to church on Sunday. And it's just that. So being human will become more and more interesting and fun. As humans, rediscover connectedness as the starting point of everything. Humans will have to return to that, and they will, because when you have higher consciousness, you already understand that. So you will behave from connectedness, not from self-interest. And you can't teach that to humans in the low level of consciousness, right? Because it's an evolutionary thing, so we need to be there already. So over the next couple hundred years, more and more souls on that level will incarnate, and then it's done. So, but in the meantime, also the collective consciousness on this planet will have to choose between the two versions of complete annihilation or, moving forward. And both are okay, right? But I think it's more fun to see if one can make this a success. Again, there are so many life forms invested. And if humans understood how many cultures are invested in the success of this life form, maybe humans would feel at least a tad of responsibility for what's going on. But, most likely, humans will get there. Mm-hmm.
So back to mantras as a spiritual practice. I know that many of my friends in the spiritual community, there's this image of this woman sitting like with a fan, and her hair's blowing back, and she's sitting in lotus position, and she's also filming herself on Instagram while she's meditating with a fan blowing her hair, and it's just this like classic image of spirituality in 2024. I just wonder, Sandra referred to, like, IKYA Mantra are beautiful, really sharp knives of spiritual study. Why is that? What is it that's unique about mantra?
Well, when you study with me, it's a little different. I do not rely on tradition or religion or dogma. I have more fun. My only objective is to assist those of you who want to wake up in achieving exactly that. And I will teach you whatever you need in order to do that successfully. Meaning it's not about how you feel. God knows you will feel awful. You will be confronted. You will be challenged. Because you have to work out your resistance. Meaning everything that stands between you and that level of consciousness is something you have to work out. And your ego will not do that easily. The state of self would not do it easily. And peeling away everything that you are not, one would think it's something that we want, but it's not as individuals. So, I give you the sharpest tools and also teach you how to use them. But then it's for you to actually use them and get results. But my experience is that a lot of the old stuff simply don't work anymore because the consciousness is different. Right? The situation we're in on this planet right now is so radically different from what it was a few hundred years ago, a few thousand years ago, that many of the practices simply don't work anymore. They can still work, but they don't work the way they really need to. So I give you a lot of mantras from both, I would say, like more hidden traditions, also from other planets and other places, simply based on how they work and how they connect with human consciousness today. And when people study with me, and if they have a lot of experience with mantras, they experience these mantras as a lot more powerful because they do the job. I often compare earlier practices with, as a kid, if you get like toy tools, you have a toolbox with a little saw and a little hammer, it's all made of plastic, it's very safe, but you can learn how to do all of it without harming yourself, right? Because you don't start with a chainsaw. You simply don't, right? You don't start with a big old drill. You don't. You have to have the lighter version. So first you start with the plastic toys, and then maybe you have, easier tools that you get to play with that are still a little kind of safer than the professional ones, and then you move on to the real tools. And you will be surprised just by how effective they are, how much you're able to cut through, and what they do to you. For many, it's a shocking experience because often when it comes to working with mantras, you can feel, oh yeah, it feels nice, and that's it. The mantras I teach will pull you apart, assist you in peeling away all illusions, everything that you are not, and will fuel your spiritual ambition. So these are pro tools, and normally they're not taught to humans because humans operate at a very low consciousness, but in the right setting, right? If you learn the disciplines, if you learn the practices, if you learn how to harness an intention of true spiritual ambition. So you can also peel away all that fluff and all that ego noise. Then you're ready. So, yes, I love working with mantras, and I love using mantras myself. One of my favorite things to do, because they're like different tuning forks. They address different complexes of principles and energy and consciousness and karma, so you get specific angles on yourself, and then they will tune you so that you will vibrate a certain way, and you get to know more about yourself as a vehicle, as a tool. And like, okay, when I use a mantra, something happens to me, and I open this channel, this energy is coming through, it addresses this in me, this is the type of karma I'm working with, and it assists me in accessing this type of wisdom, and then yet another mantra will work differently. And it's fun and exciting. But to me, also what is so important about mantras is that it's not dogma, it's not about believing something. And if you believe just hard enough, maybe you may feel something, right? It's making you the channel. It's making you the source. It's making you the tool, right? So instead of having it outside of you and you having to rely on someone else or follow someone or submit to something, it's you. So through mantras, you learn to become it yourself, right? To become the vehicle, to become the channel, and to learn what that means, because you are responsible for your own awakening. And you can never wake up spiritually if you follow, if you submit, if you believe, all of that. That's for kids. So waking up means you are waking up from the person. You are waking up from this world of illusion. And then you have to transform. But working with mantras means that you transform. It's not like you get a better set of beliefs, that you get a better way of feeling or experiencing your life, right? It's you. And you gradually learning about the spiritual potential of what you are and how to live and how to explore different parts of yourself, and experiencing how something as simple as a mantra, which is basically, singing in combination of sounds, how that can completely shift your energy and your level of consciousness and how you perceive everything, right? It's so much fun. And it's the deepest and simplest form of practice. But of course, you combine this with meditation and other things. But in this course, we are giving you everything you need to get the most out of your studies with mantras. So if you have any interest for mantras, and we have an open house in a couple of days' time.
Yes, so as you've been talking, I can speak personally to this, but I think it's also maybe a little bit universal in that there's this point where, awakening and becoming more aware of things, it necessarily requires moving into responsibility. You've mentioned that word a few times tonight. And I think it's really interesting in the context of the principle that we're discussing tonight, that in a world it wasn't necessarily intentional as humans that we created a world of increasing distraction, but it really serves well the part of us that has no real interest in responsibility and would much prefer to have life sort of served up to us. But I can recognize in myself that part of me is also completely unaware of what it takes to make the world around me, So I just think it would be interesting for you to speak for a moment to this point of responsibility versus the illusion of freedom that we have in sort of that consumer mindset, and how can spiritual discipline, or singing mantras or spiritual practices, how can they help us past that particularly sticky point?
Right. Understand that throughout evolution, everything was dangerous. There was not enough of anything, right? So you were supposed to do whatever, and you learned, how to gather food, or even to grow food, or find a partner, how to protect yourself, all of these things. But fear was the foundation. So survival is trying to not die, right, by doing certain things. So most of your instincts are fear-based. When you are hungry, that could kill you if you don't eat. If you're thirsty, that could kill you if you don't drink. Right? If there's any danger, if you don't deal with it, you could die. So it's always this fear of death. And then what we want, what we see as freedom, is freedom from all of that. Because that's comfort. Comfort is when something is predictable and repetitive. So we can predict its repetitiveness. Then we're comfortable. And that's freedom from. And it means that we basically switch off, right? We can relax. But remember, throughout evolution, that didn't happen very often. We would take a nap, and then the lion would come and eat us. So it's like it didn't happen very often. We would have to be alert. So it's more that we had the desire, and we could then have little nuggets of comfort, which was a sign that, you've done good, right? You have your cave or little whatever it is, and you have kind of secured your resources. Now you can relax, you have everything under control. So we would always try to seek that, right? We would want that, and we would get a lot of reward chemicals, because this means that, now you can raise a family, right? Now you're following the plan of evolution. So humans became better at it. Once they started to cooperate, they had tribes, which means they can protect each other. They can find food. They may even grow food. They must start producing things. They will begin to specialize. So things become more predictable, and people may then do what they're good at without having to look over their shoulder all the time, because there are people taking care of that. So humans began moving in that direction. And the goal has always been more and more freedom from. And then we have more and more comfort. And that is also what's killing us, because our growth also comes when we're challenged. Remember, karma is resistance. It means we have to let life challenge us. It's when we test out ourselves, when we test out our resistance, when we're pushed around, when we're triggered, and we then learn to change or transform and adapt. That's how we grow. We only grow horizontally, as we say, like evolution only happens when there's a change in the environment and the individual or group are forced to adapt. Because we don't change just because we want to, we only change out of necessity. Right? So all of these insecurities, when things change, season, the water dries up, whatever it is, and then we have to move, we have to change, we have to adapt. That is also how evolution happens. It's also how we grow as individuals. It's how consciousness grows. So when life becomes more predictable, it means that we stop growing spiritually. And there is a point where everything is so predictable that we're consumers in everything, because when it comes to our survival patterns, absolute predictability, absolute safety, absolute comfort, that's the goal. So we want that. But we also fall asleep. There is no more evolution. In fact, we then will become dumber. And humans are becoming less intelligent by the week. We are becoming dumber, because intelligence is basically problem solving. It's using the whole catalog of experiences, both genetic and personal and in group, figuring out how can I assemble this in a new way so I can figure out how this works and how I can do that thing, based on the need to adapt, meaning that it's a new situation that you don't have, a textbook on. You don't have the handbook for that, so we need to invent, right? You need to use what you've got, and you need to kind of like assemble it in a new way to make it work. When everything is already working, you don't have to do that. Problem solving is not your job, it's someone else's job. Your job is to complain and bitch about it. And it means that your problem solving abilities are diminishing, which means your intelligence is then basically dissolving. And you will become more sophisticated in finding new ways to complain, new ways to be entitled, new ways to blame the world, new ways to pass responsibility. But you will be terrible at problem solving, and we see that with many people today. They can't solve anything because it's not their responsibility, they think. So this is just a natural result of evolution, and that our genetics still live in a time where everything was difficult, everything was scarce, and we have to solve problems, we have to adapt, we have to do all this, and nothing was safe. Our genes are not adjusted to this life. So what helped us back then is now killing us. And it's completely natural, but then this is a change in the environment, right? But normally, evolution like this would take about, 10 to 20,000 years. Now will have to happen in 200, which is biologically impossible. So it takes higher consciousness to incarnate, which is exactly what's going on. But genetically, you are not equipped to deal with modern life. You're equipped to deal with difficulties and fighting for survival, not to actually having a life that works. We are programmed to want to have a life that works, but because throughout evolution we never had it. We never stop. It can never be too comfortable. We just want to be even more comfortable. There is no end to how soft the comfort under the pillows should be. We just adjust. It should be even more. It should be even more comfortable, even more predictable, because we do not have it in our genetic makeup that this is good enough. It doesn't exist. So we're now, as a life form, falling, the victim to our own programs because we have succeeded. But we have no genetic recognition of that, so we just continue. And we destroy ourselves in the process.
Yes, we have a question online of what is the difference between systemic biological stress and overwhelm? Because to this person's understanding, one assists a spiritual growth and one does not, but struggles to understand which is which.
Now, systemic stress is a permanent state of shock, often caused by overwhelm. So if you think that you experience too much and you don't know how to deal with everything because you can't, it's too much, it's too noisy, too many things at the same time, that causes a lot of stress. And stress that becomes permanent, or that you have too many reactions at the same time, it means that you will be kind of locked into a state where the body produces stress chemicals and electrical signals continuously. That is the state of most people. That causes inflammation, causes cancer, causes mental illness, all of these things. So the stress is the reaction. Overwhelm can also be dealt with in a way that causes growth. And it's doing the exact opposite. Stress is a state where we are justifying our own resistance, saying that I don't know how to deal with this, so that's wrong. It should be different. Spiritual overwhelm, or the way to deal with it, is that this represents a bigger space. This represents a way of being or natural laws beyond my current understanding. There is always order in life. There's always order in existence. So I surrender to it. What we often go through in our spiritual training, when we're being trained spiritually, is that we make sure that the space and the spiritual laws and the demands are always a little bit ahead of the individual, in such a way that the individual never feels that he is in control. Because when the individual feels that I'm in control, I understand everything, right? An individual will turn any spiritual training into an ego thing. And you know it. You've seen it in others, probably also in yourself. When you think you understand something spiritually, the ego will immediately take it, ooh, I'm spiritual, it's that thing, and I'm better than others, and I have all these, secret insights, whatever. The ego can't help itself. It's natural. So often what we do as part of spiritual training is that we make sure that what the student is exposed to is always beyond comprehension, is always beyond what can be grasped and controlled. So when we then let that kind of activate the student will always feel, I can't cope. I don't understand. I don't know what to do. It was brilliant, because then it means that your ego will most likely stay more flexible. And all you can do is to surrender. Because the training is to understand that truth can never be controlled. It can never be understood. It can never be held. It will always be more than we are. So in a higher consciousness, we are in a permanent state of surrender, meaning that we understand that whatever we think we know, it's worthless. It's being in a state of love, being in a state of being true, and not being in the way of life. So life can express itself, it can flow through. But we also understand that the form of an individual is limited. So overwhelm is necessary as part of the training. So when I just, I have to let go. I have to give over. I have to surrender. I have to listen for guidance. I am not enough. I can't do this. And yet, you want to do it. Yet, you have this ambition. So you have to be pushed past your boundaries, past your sense of control, your comfort definitely, but even where you feel that you have any sense of what's going on. So all you've got is surrender and being in the presence of the Master. In all real traditions, this is always where we bring students. It's necessary. And it means that the more a student learns to be in that state, the faster he or she is able to work out karma, because then one begins to realize, I can't hold on to anything because I don't even know what's what anymore. I don't know what's real. I don't know what I am. I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. I can't hold on to anything. And then we begin to realize that it's not about what we can control or what we can hold on to. It's when we let go of everything, then truth gradually becomes kind of visible. Because truth is not manifestation. It's not anything you can understand or hold. You can be in it. You can let it be in you. But peeling away everything, and it's also the peeling is not, well, I don't like that thing, so let's peel that away. It's when you don't know, and you just have to let it happen. And you don't care what it is, because you don't understand it anyway, but you just keep going. All advanced students they live in this state permanently because they know the moment they let their individual self experience control, they basically self-destruct because the ego will immediately try to take ownership. And it happens sometimes. It happens to all spiritual students that the ego will take over. And then, you will drift off and do your thing. And then at some point you figure out this is boring. Because then it's just whatever stories the ego tells you and how important you are and all of that. At some point that burns out because the sensation of it wears off at some point. And then you'll find your way back on track, right? But understanding that being in a state of overwhelm spiritually requires to already having learned to react less, to be less triggered, to have less stories, because otherwise that will consume you. But then having just the smallest level of overwhelm, with the right training, can then also assist the student in letting go more of that complex of a reaction and ego. And as that begins to melt away, then we increase the state of overwhelm. So when people have systemic stress, it belongs to the lower consciousness. It belongs to the kind of biological horizontal complex of survival and the denial of one's own karma, right? As I said, whenever you react, it is because you are in a state of denial. And then you become that energy so that you get attached to it. So you have to deal with it. And it will stay in you until you have resolved that resistance somehow. But the state of overwhelm is wonderful once you understand it. Because it's just like jumping and knowing that life will catch you.
Okay, from YouTube also, but then another interesting challenge here, how to understand the difference between spiritual surrender and following. Because this student observes often that humans create, we all do, we create filtered versions of life that include hierarchy, control, and following. And it's easy when we become more aware of this pattern to get scared that we're going to end up surrendering, we're going to end up submitting and following rather than surrendering. So how do we negotiate that?
Right. If you end up there, at some point you will notice. You will notice, oh, right, I'm following, I'm submitting. I'm letting someone else control me. At some point you will notice if that happens. But surrender is, like, if we take the difference between following, submitting, and surrender, is that when you follow, it is always a hierarchical decision and action. You place someone above you and you follow, meaning that you're trying to emulate, and by doing so, you are better than. Now, that is also completely legitimate. It's also how we learn. Because by following, we're then trying to copy whomever we are following. And then, once we have copied, maybe we're able to make it ours a little bit. And then we move on, right? So at each level of consciousness, we have ways of being and doing and figuring things out. But when we start to feel or sense that awakening is coming, we cannot follow anymore, because awakening is about you becoming authentically you, which means the opposite of following. And think of also the act of following often means that also you want other people to see you. Look at me, I'm doing the right thing. Right? That's what a child will do. They will copy their parents, and then look at me, I'm doing the right thing, and everyone will applaud. The whole family. That's kind of how we want it to be, right? So that's natural. So it's hierarchy, it's copying, it's wanting other people to see you. And you see this in a lot of spiritual movements, right? When people are following, they just want to do the right thing and for everyone else to see how great they are. Also the knowledge they have and how they can, dazzle people with their insights and, how close they are to the teaching, all of that. So when you can see that type of game, that's following. Surrender means a constant state of not knowing anything. It's a state where you let go of your definitions, let go of your understanding of even who you are, where you are, what's going on, and why. You understand that whatever I'm in is greater than anything I understand at this moment. And I just surrender. I let go, and I allow for the higher to enter. And I understand that I have no definitions or understanding, nor will I ever. But that's fine, because I want to be in the presence of truth. And you don't care if anyone sees it, because it's not relevant to anyone but me. It's a personal thing, because you understand that, well, we all go through our own evolution. That's a separate journey for each and every one of us. So there's no reason to compare. Followers always compare, because they're children. And you learn, right? And you can listen. But you also recognize that, yeah, we're different. So it means that you can listen to that person and that person. When you follow, you're always very concerned about listening to the right person, right? It has to be above you in the hierarchy. So, you will never listen to someone who's beneath you. So followers are always very hierarchical because it's not in them. So it's trying to gain position, which is a natural part of evolution, right? So surrender is non-evolution. It's stepping out of it and just saying, whatever is. Right? It's that, show me thy way. It's never about, how can I achieve this? How can I get this right? It's doing the opposite. So, although they may look very similar to a kind of normal person, in essence, they are opposites. Now, what we try to do in our spiritual awakening is practicing surrender. Knowing that, again, truth, the divine, cannot be controlled, cannot be held, cannot be contained. It's when we let go of everything, let go of our definitions and understandings and identities and all that, we begin to move closer to it. So surrender is that constant state of peeling away whatever is not true, whatever is not real. Being in a state of humility as much as we can, and to not get in the way. So it's also something that kind of grows in you over time. It's not where you start, as that you have to peel away a lot to even contemplate the practice of surrender. But it's a fundamental element of true spiritual practices.
Okay. To maybe circle us back around, the new student here on YouTube was talking about a near-death experience that they had, and how it disconnected them from everything, was the most peaceful feeling they've ever felt in the history of their emotions. Then they made an interesting comment: there is no going back to sleep once you open your eyes. And I just wonder, given the topic tonight, Well, could you speak to that? Is it in fact possible? Like, can we start to wake up and actually choose to kind of go back to sleep by distracting ourselves?
What we need to understand is that each kind of level of spiritual evolution, right? Think of it as different kind of levels or steps. Now, and think of each step as a space. When you enter a space, that will be, your classroom. That will be what you will be studying. And you can go back and forth and up and down and here and there. It will still be the same space. You can never go to a level beneath because you're done. But whatever happens in this space is what you're still trying to figure out. So you may wake up and then fall asleep again. You may this, you may that, you may understand a principle, and then you understand, I don't understand anything. You may be peaceful, and then you go out and kill someone, right? It all happens in that same space, that same classroom, as you are being exposed to your own resistance, your own karma on that level, and also exposed to the spiritual potential in that space. And of course, there will be a lot of discussion, because that's how we learn, meaning that you will be doing all sorts of things and going forwards and backwards and up and down. And you may think, because the human brain, of course, operates in a very short timeline, believing that, oh, now I'm going backwards. Well, you're just going backwards in the same room. And you have to map out the entire room and experience every principle from all angles anyway, so that's fine. So you cannot reverse your spiritual evolution, but you may have the ambition of going into this space, and you may wake up and you may fall asleep again in that space. So it's not like when you open your eyes, it's done forever. Remember that you go through billions of different incarnations. So it's not, awakening is not something that happens once. It's a principle. And you may go through it again and again and again based on where you are in your evolution. Waking up spiritual as a fly is different from waking up spiritual as a human. Right? So you will go through many of the same movements based on consciousness, based on evolution. And that will continue. So think of when you are in greater spaces, you will also go through cycles of lifetimes where you're studying certain spiritual principles. And when you study a new principle, you're always an idiot. You may be a very advanced spiritual student, but once you study something you haven't studied before, you're still an idiot. And then you go through all the motions and you have to experience all the different types of resistance and how to learn how to do this and how to be this. And then you begin to awake, and then you get hang of it, and then you transcend all of that. So you may have done that tens of thousands of times or millions of times, but not necessarily with the different karmic principles that you're studying right now. So our level of consciousness and level of evolution is not consistent, is not one thing. So it's not like you open your eyes once, right? And you may also blink. You may do a lot of things. So understand that your evolution, spiritual growth, is so complex and it's so dynamic and flexible. It's not just one thing. And then you've done that and that is forever. It's not how it works at all. And just like in life, even when you've learned something, and when then life changes and you try to do that thing and it doesn't work anymore because life has moved on, right? Think of technology, right? Think of phones. Phones 50 years ago versus now, right? Try to do this thing with an old phone and it will not work because life has moved on. So it is with things we figure out, right? So nothing ever stands still. And this is also, again, why we can be really brilliant at this thing and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. So we have to reinvent. We have to readjust. So it never stops. We just get better at it. I always say that the difference between, someone who is not awake and someone who is in enlightenment is that when you are in enlightenment, you're simply a really good student. You're simply really good at learning everything from scratch very quickly. Because you have become aware that everything changes all the time. You have to reinvent everything. You have to take everything you've ever learned and then apply it in a different way. And you learn that never stops. So you simply become really good at doing that. Because the universe will never stop unfolding. Reality will never stop finding new ways to be. And in the enlightened state, you figure out how to be on point with your own ability to adapt. So you adapt real time while everything is happening. And then that's the sign that you don't have resistance. Because if you don't have resistance, you can reinvent and change everything like that. And that's what it is. While humans hope, of course, that then you're done. Right? That's always the hope. Back to comfort. Right? Then you have nothing more to learn. You're done, it's over. And then you can just be there and dominate everyone with your knowledge. It's the opposite. It's the stupid ones that don't have to learn because they learn something and they think it's forever. Right? When you advance spiritually, you'll learn that everything changes and then it changes faster and faster and faster. It becomes more and more complex. And it never stops. So the enlightened state is simply that you've learned to adapt real time to everything at once. And your awakening is also that. And when you look at, therefore, your journey, why it needs to be more complex is because life is extremely complex. Think of your own life. Okay, think of the complexity of this planet, which would be a lot. Think of the complexity of this solar system, this galaxy, and then the trillions of galaxies just in this dimension. And then you have limitless dimensions. And now think of adapting to all of it at once. So, if we think of your life being complex, it's so not. But it's a start. But it's also for us to be realistic as beings. When you think being on this planet is too much, that's fine, but it also can help you be more realistic and to soothe the ego, saying, well, okay, I'm not quite there yet, and that's okay. Right? Real growth can only happen when we are being realistic. And the ego gets in the way so much. But if you can say that when you experience a level of complexity, it also means that you are learning to deal with complexity, then the complexity of life. Because spiritually, we'll have to deal with multidimensionality, right? Multi-consciousness. Everything becoming more interesting and complex. So, yeah, that's also part of it. That's also why you chose to incarnate here, because you are exposed to more at the same time. And then, does it scare you to sleep? Or do you feel invigorated? But if you feel invigorated, you will not react, you will not complain, you will not bitch and moan. You will find it interesting. When something triggers you, you will find it interesting because it's something in yourself that you are not aware of. And then you will, float that and see what that is, and you will explore it and play with it. Playfulness is a big part of spiritual awakening. Humans have completely forgotten how to play. Everything is so serious. Everyone takes themselves so seriously, which is a sign of falling asleep. It's self-centeredness. When we begin to wake up, for real, we become more playful because we see how humorous everything is. We don't take anything seriously. Then it's easier to deal with complexity, right? It's easier to deal with adaptation because you don't believe that things has to be a certain way. They can be that way or that way. Sure, that's fine. You have fewer reactions. You pass less judgment. And you flow more. So you have increased flexibility. And then you can see and experience how life will move you and place you And if life places you today, well, that's where you are. And if life places you, well, that's where you are. And you don't care. Because you're in a state of surrender. This is also why working with mantras is so important. It will assist you in letting go of all of these kind of human mechanisms that are blocking you. And remember, as I said, it's you who are blocking life. And that blockage is being rendered and mirrored to you. So the more you feel that life around you is blocking you or stopping you, whatever it is, it's because you're stopping life. Right? We need to look at what life is showing us. We need to take it in. We need to process. We need to take responsibility, and we need to wake up. And in this type of work, mantras are unique. That you become the more kind of efficient being and system to digest your own karma. And to, instead of being stuck in reaction, you digest, you learn, you transform, you grow, and you heal, and you become better at it. So they're the most efficient ways to cut through the fog and to bring it into a state of connectedness and active consciousness. So we'll have an open house on Wednesday. We'll probably have the link. So if you want to, please join us. And we start the new course in October. Yes, in October. It will be an exciting cycle. I always, for each cycle, I lift the level a little bit as people become more advanced. So this will also yet be the most advanced level and the most challenging one, but also the most fun one. So if you're interested in working with mantras and you want to have fun with the spiritual growth and leave behind all that suffering, all that negativity, and so like spiritual growth is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be loving, it's supposed to be creative, it's supposed to give you real freedom. Not freedom from, but freedom coming from you being competent in your own existence and then being able to have fun with absolutely everything. Because when you're not scared, everything is just interesting, right? When you're not in reaction and your ego has nothing to prove, everything is just interesting. And you can listen to anyone, you can learn from anyone, and you can share whatever. Because you understand that it's basically just life in connectedness and we're part of it. So it becomes increasingly fun. And your heart will open up more. And through that, life can become what you truly want it to be, but what you can never achieve through the human culture and civilization the way it is now. So if you're interested, join me, and I will give you tools that will truly transform your life forever.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us for IKYA Live, world news from the spiritual perspective, and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice in your everyday life. And if you'd like to dive even deeper into how to handle this world of distraction, again, our free to everyone open house for our upcoming year-long study in IKYA Mantra, collection number 6, is coming on this Wednesday already, the 18th of September at 18 o'clock, 6 p.m. Oslo time, both on Zoom. You can register at our website, and it's also going to be here on YouTube Live, both simultaneously, as well as physically here at IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway. The website is in the chat. It's ikya.org/mantra6. And we really look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the open house on Wednesday. And then we'll be back with you in 1 month from tonight on the 3rd Monday of October at 7 p.m. for IKYA Live. Until then, be well and hope to see you all on Wednesday for the open house.